All right, well, everyone, thanks for joining us for our January 2023 SOAR Disability Ministry Network. Hard to believe, excuse me, wow, hard to believe we're already almost done with January. February's next week, just going really quick. But let me go ahead, open us up in prayer, and then we'll kind of dig in and learn about everyone. So let's pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, God, we thank you so much for this day that you've given to us. God, I thank you for everyone who is here. I thank you for those who aren't able to make it as well. Just pray that you bless all them, be with the churches, help them as they're trying to welcome families with disabilities, learn the best way to do it. God, I pray that we can all be effective in helping families with disabilities realize that the church is there and that we can welcome them, help us find the volunteers that we need, and just through everything that we need now, God. And we just thank you for your love, and just pray now that you'll be with this time of fellowship and just help us as we try to learn from one another and help one another. We give all to you and praise your name. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, let's just go around and introduce everyone. I know one of our members is going to be a little late, Adam Reese. He runs, which you guys aren't aware of. You need to find it. When he comes on, I'll let him describe it. But he runs an adult special needs ministry that does a puppet ministry down in, I want to say he's in Joplin. That is phenomenal. They write all their own skits, and then these adults with disabilities do the puppet skits. And it's phenomenal. Absolutely love it. Well, they've got their rehearsal from 6 to 7. So he'll be joining us when they're done. So he'll pop on, and then I'll have him introduce himself. But let's just go around, introduce ourselves. Why don't you give us your name and get I apologize. I had a bad cold back around Christmas time, and only having 40% lung function, that means I get to keep a cough with me for about 2 months. So I'm not contagious anymore. I'm just hacking up a lung every once in a while. So I got my supply of cough drops. I'll try to keep it at a minimum, and I'll try not to cough into the microphone and blow your ears out with that. So bear with me tonight. I apologize. But what I was saying, let's go ahead, go around, introduce ourselves, say, who you are, where you're from, what church or organization you might be associated with. And then if you want, if there's anything on your heart that you want us to address, you can share that, and then we'll come back to that later. Or if you just want to wait till later to share any questions, we can do that too, but we'll just kind of go around. And then if you do have a special needs ministry, disability ministry, why don't you tell us a little bit about that size and how many individuals and ages that you have. If you don't have one and you're trying to start one, great, let us know that. If you're here to learn, fantastic, welcome. We're happy to have you with that too. So with that, Caitlin, would you mind kicking us off? Tell everyone about you and where you're at, and I'm very excited for Caitlin. I just met with her. Was that last week we met?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, so time's flying. But yeah. Caitlin is brand new in her job now, just 3 weeks into her job. So we're excited for that. And so tell everyone where you're at and what you're doing.
Yeah, so my name's Caitlin. Like Doc said, I am like 3 weeks in. I got hired the first week in January, which is super exciting. My church is Fellowship Church. We have 3 campuses. We have one in Greenwood, Missouri. We have one in Raymore, Missouri. And then we have one in Archie, Missouri. And so it's they're all within like a 30-minute radius of each other. But yeah, I'm super excited. I'm just here to like learn and soak everything in. Honestly, the biggest thing that I'm like thinking about and eager to learn about would probably be how everyone does a buddy system, or like what type of system you all have. Because I know, like, I was reading Key Ministries buddy system outline, and they do it like by program, or they suggest it by program and whatnot. But I'm just curious how you all do it, to help with the student, I say students, but with the kiddos, to like have the same person, so there's familiarity, but then also not to burn out our volunteers,
Sure.
So that is
Sure.
what I'm interested in.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely be
Yeah.
talking about that here in a little bit. Jane, welcome. Why don't you tell everyone, introduce yourself and tell everyone about you.
I'm Jane, and I go to River Church Family in Raytown, Missouri. And I'm a volunteer in the disability ministry that we have, or the special needs ministry we have. What I understand, they've had it for 9 years. We have like a buddy system. As far as I know, though, I'm the only buddy that they have. Most of the kids that we have in our with disabilities don't really need buddies at this point in time. So we have about 8 families in our church that are impacted by disability. Honestly, the person who leads the ministry has adopted, I think, 5 or 6 kids with disabilities. And so they are a big part of that ministry. I guess what I'm interested in finding out is how do we reach all, like, as far as I know, Raytown doesn't have a church that has a ministry for individuals and families with disabilities. And so how do we reach those people who are really hard to reach? I teach special education in the schools. I work with parents who have a lot of fears and all these things. And in that context, I can only, share so much. And so I would like to have a different outlet and have to try to reach these people. So that's my heart.
Great. Yeah, those are great questions. We'll be happy to talk through all that here in a little bit. All right, Bob, welcome. Why don't you share about yourself?
Okay. I'm here to learn. I don't have a active ministry at the moment. I would love to find a way to try to bring it. I happen to be Catholic, and so trying to find some Catholic parishes would be neat, I think. I mean, interdenominational in a smaller community. One of my sons is a Catholic priest, and I'm hoping we can get him engaged. But I just have a heart for the parents that are working so hard for these children. I have 6 children and 8 grandchildren. And so I just have it really tugs on me. What can I do to help? They are doing such wonderful witnesses of love, and that it just is impressive. It's just inspiring. So just want to make a small contribution, and I'm just listening today to see what others are talking about doing, how they do it. So appreciate your time.
Yeah. Bob and I had lunch together today and did some pretty cool dreaming, where we can get both Protestant and Catholic churches, parishes together to do a respite for families in rural Kansas. And I really think it's possible to pull off. So we're going to be praying through that we might be able to pull that off with SOAR being there for that. So Bob's a huge blessing for us here at SOAR. He does a lot with us. Leanne, welcome. Why don't you share who you are, where you're at, and what's going on with you?
Okay, I am trying to figure out the phone because I couldn't get there I am, finally. I couldn't get the computer to work. And so I was like, okay, how do I do this on the phone? So it's not very good. But yeah, sure. So I am in Mount Juliet, Wilson County, Tennessee, and First Baptist Mount Juliet. And we have a special needs ministry for our children. We currently have 4 children that we are providing various levels of support. So we have one little girl who has a buddy. She has the same buddy every Sunday. And she doesn't need the buddy very much, but she does have her, just make sure that everything goes well with her. Then we have a special needs room for one child who is not able to participate with age group or other children. And this is new for us, that we have not been able to have a separate room before. Even though we had a separate room, it wasn't intended for special needs, and it wasn't really appropriate. But because we have a school at our church, we just had to use a room that was already set up for classroom. So it wasn't very good for him. But praise God, we now have the room dedicated for special needs, and we have it set up just for sensory needs and that kind of thing. And so that's wonderful. And we hope to be able to minister to more children than just the one that we have. And then we have a couple of others that do need buddies, and their buddies rotate. So they don't have the same one every Sunday, and it works out well. We use, and I can maybe tell you a little bit more about how that works, as Caitlin had asked about buddies. So could speak into that a little bit.
Yeah. Great. Well,
But
let's introducing, and then we'll come back to that.
Yeah. So what I'm interested in at this point, because I have delegated some of my responsibilities with families and volunteers to others that are in our ministry. And now I want to lead our leadership team to get more involved with the church and the community, and as oversight of, professionals for our ministry, to just kind of mature it a little bit and to get the word out more in the community. Like Jane was talking about, how do we reach out to those families that really need this ministry? And so I'm interested in how to just energize that leadership team. They do not work with the children. And so, but they have offered, they've agreed to be on the leadership team, and like how to get them really energized to do some things.
Right. Awesome. All right. Dean, welcome. Introduce yourself, brother.
Let me find the mic switch real quick. So Dean Blevins, I'm actually a professor at Nazarene Theological Seminary down in Kansas City, Missouri, and live out in Olathe, Kansas. So Doc and I have been, actually, I think I hijacked Doc right before Christmas, but the seminary's in a process right now of thinking about how to develop ministries, particularly in worship and prayer, with children with autism. And we are right now. If I look tired, it's because I've been spending most of my time writing a grant. We don't have it yet. I always start with that. But we are looking to see how we might partner with churches, particularly in the Kansas City area, around this effort. A little bit of personal background is not so much myself, but my wife has been very active with an organization called Camp Encourage in Kansas City, which does a lot, particularly for children with autism and their parents. And I suspect it rubbed off on me is probably the best way to say it. So I'm here to learn. I'll just be upfront. I don't bring a ton of expertise at all to this conversation, but I am very much interested in how. And Doc has already given me some advice that even as you're working with children with autism, you're really thinking about the broader field of disability ministry at the same time. We just, for the sake of grantors, try to define it in enough with enough scope, so to speak, defined well, that they would see that there's a possibility of a result through the grant. So I'll leave it at that. I really am here to listen in more than anything else, and I'm not trying to pitch the grant. this point, because I'm waiting to see whether we get it. It's the simplest way to say it.
Nope. Sounds good. We're glad to have all of you. Again, I think you all know me, but I'm Doc Hunsley. I'm the executive director and founder of SOAR. Sorry. Again, real quick on my background. So I was a disability pastor. I was a children's pastor before that. Tried to do a special needs ministry at my church as a children's pastor. Talked to my senior leadership, and my immediate response from them was, no, I don't want those kind of people here. And you know, that is the a pretty common response amongst churches across the country today, unfortunately, and was not able, you know, to start a disability ministry. However, a few months later was called back into the office because there were 3 adults with disabilities in the worship service who were too vocal and causing disruptions. So I was told, literally, get rid of them. And so without any argument, I said happy to. And instead of getting rid of them, I created an adult special needs Sunday school plus an adult respite program for them. And that was my first test with it. And then I ended up leaving, going to another church where I talked to them about just volunteering. And they said they wanted to have a world-class children's ministry. But in order to have a world-class children's ministry, they needed a special needs ministry. And they had never been able to do that. And they knew, they had heard and kind of stalked me socially, knew who I was and what I had done. And they thought God brought me to them to start a disability ministry. So that's actually where SOAR started, was at Grace Church here in Overland Park. I joined the staff as a volunteer, became the disability pastor, grew a ministry from 3 individuals to over 800 over an 8-year period of time, doing camps, doing respite. And then I'm passionate now. And then 3 years ago, we became an independent nonprofit, completely on our own, left the staff. The church helped us become an independent nonprofit. And now one of the things I'm extremely passionate about is helping churches create disability ministries, or take what you already have, take it to the next level. And my goal is to assist at least 1,000 churches in the next 5 years. And to date now, I've assisted over 500 churches throughout the United States and 12 countries around the world. So, you know, we're on our way with that. But so with everything, everything is wide open. Everything is free game tonight. There are no stupid questions. You know, we are all here to learn from each other. And it doesn't matter if you're new in ministry, if you've been in ministry, if you're an old fart like me and in ministry for a while, we all have something to say and learn. Or if you're here just to learn and be a part of it, love having you. Everyone can chip in and talk whenever they want. I definitely do not have to be the one doing all the talking, so please help me out. Plus, you don't want to hear me yakking and hacking all the time. So let's come back and first our first one, let's address buddy systems with that and kind of talk through that. So correct me if I'm wrong, from what I've heard from everyone already, pretty much everyone here uses a buddy system. Is that right? Okay. Do any of you have a self-contained classroom where you'll put the individuals with special needs in and not have them, you know, with their classmates for like the entire period? I'm not talking like a sensory room where it might be for a little period at a time, but have the entire class where they're kind of segregated from the rest of the team. Maybe it's you only have a couple kids because they're harder to control or they can't do the classroom. Do any of you have that situation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many individuals do you have in that situation, Leanne?
Right now we have 2. One is actually an adult, but she is totally immobile and nonverbal, and so she's not participating in any way, but we shepherd her. That's what we call our volunteers as shepherds. And all she really tolerates is someone pushing her wheelchair around, and she listens to Christian music. But our other little fellow is a child, a 10-year-old, and he is in our room the entire time that his family is at church. And we provide very little curriculum. Mostly we have videos and we just interact with him in a loving way and talk about Jesus, just he's basically what you would do with an infant, because that's his level, is just an infant level. And so we don't really have a class that we have any children separated except for him.
Okay. All right.
We could, we're up there, we could, and we have curriculum we can use, and we could, but we just don't have anyone right now.
Okay. All right. Good. Hey, Michaela, welcome. Welcome to the talk. We're just kind of got done introducing everyone. If you could just pop on real quick and just let everyone know who you are, where you're at, if you've got a ministry, what your ministry's like. And then the first question we're talking about right now is, do you use a buddy system, or do you have your participants in segregated in their own room?
Hi, I'm Michaela. I am at Doxa Church in Rockland, California. And I am our discipleship lead for kids. And we do have a buddy program that we're just starting out right now.
Awesome. All right. And then as we get going, welcome, Michaela. And as we get going, if you got any questions for us too, we'll talk through that. So on the buddy, and again, anyone can jump here and talk through it. But basically, when dealing with individuals with disabilities and special needs in ministry, we pretty much have there are pretty much two avenues we can go when we're meeting their needs. And there's either an integrated one or a segregated one. And honestly, there's a third one, which is a combination of the two. Let me kind of describe all three first, and then we can talk through pros and cons of all of them. And very honestly, the best ministry will use all three at the same time as they get bigger. My personal preference and favorite is an integrated system. That's the buddy system, where you've got a one-on-one buddy with the individual, and they're in their age-appropriate classroom or their developmentally appropriate classroom. Sometimes we have to move individuals to be in a more developmentally appropriate classroom. For instance, I'll use an example I had a little guy, he was a fifth grader, but he had profound autism, profound Down syndrome, and he was the size of a 3-year-old and the size of a 5-year-old, but mentality of a 3-year-old. Well, I ended up having him in our kindergarten class, and he did real well there. He was a little too big to be in the preschool rooms, but he did really well in the kindergarten. He was in the kindergarten class for about 3 years. He just didn't grow much and excelled there because that's where his development was at. If he was in the 5th grade, he would have struggled with that. And so, I think it was Jane who said, they have several individuals, but they don't require a buddy. That is still an integrated system. Not every individual has to have a one-on-one buddy. I always like to say I allow the individual to try to succeed on their own. That's one of the first things I always allow an individual to do. We always want to do the least restrictive environment in anything we do. So allowing them to succeed on their own without any help. Many of our kids, especially when you're in a Sunday school environment. It's only an hour, maybe an hour, 15, hour and a half. It's structured enough that the individual, once they learn the structure, they can usually follow and be okay with it. What I have learned is in elementary, that works well for our, individuals with Down syndrome. They may be able to go without a buddy, and actually do well. But almost all my kiddos with autism have required the help, required the assistance. And again, what is a buddy? You can call it whatever you want. I love the shepherd. Some people call them VIPs, some people call them coaches, some people call them friends. They're all right. It's whatever works for your ministry. But basically, it's a guide on the side who's there to help make sure the individual with special needs stay safe. They're staying out of trouble. They can stay focused. They help them in learning the teacher-generated curriculum. The buddy's not the one doing the actual teaching. Usually the teacher in the classes still is doing that, but they're helping them do that. They're also identifying, they're starting to get agitated and working through things. The thing that we always have to remember is all behavior is a form of communication. All behavior is a form of communication. So if a child starts fussing and acting out, we got to figure out why. They're trying to communicate something to us. Even if they're verbal, they're telling us something, and it's our job to try to figure out why. Well, if we can train our buddies to try to learn that, and where we can figure out before it accelerates into something big, we can, kind of nip a problem in the bud. And then the buddy also helps to generate interaction with their peers, because we don't want the individual just be on their own. We want them to interact with the peers. We want the peers to learn from them, and we want them to learn from the peers. And that's why I love the integrated system, because it teaches neurotypical kids how to accept individuals with special needs, and they can all learn from each other. So that's kind of the buddy system integrated one, and we can go into more here, and you guys can ask some questions in a minute. Now let's talk about the segregated. And whenever I talk about this, it's always important that you do what is right for your church. You don't do what Doc says he likes the best. You do what's right for your church. I've helped churches do both programs, and the bottom line is you're welcoming families with disabilities. That's the bottom line we're trying to teach them. So the segregated is where you put all individuals with special needs or disabilities into the same room. Depending on the church, it may be all ages into that same room. That's one where I want to kind of talk through and think through things, because you don't necessarily want to have, a 3-year-old in the same room as an 18-year-old, especially if that 18-year-old can be aggressive or active with things. So we need to kind of think through all that. But they're all in that room. They then have, usually you'll end up doing a specialized curriculum that's just geared towards special needs. So there's a lot of special needs curriculum out there, or they'll take the curriculum they have and modify it. The buddy system one, the integrated, usually they're able to just go along with the general curriculum you already have. And you do still have buddies in a segregated room. You just normally don't have a one-on-one buddy. So you might have one for every 2 or one for every 3. However, you might have a child or teen in the room that will require a one-on-one buddy, and then you'll provide that for them. And then you have the combination of the two, integrated, segregated one. And let me describe that one a little bit. That works extremely well in student ministry, in a middle school, high school situation. And so the way that usually works, you'll keep the individual with disability with the entire group. Have them be integrated with everybody. And that works well for worship. It works well for the game time with student ministries. And you'd probably have a buddy kind of helping them through all that. But what I've learned now was at junior high is where you really get a huge expansion, a huge separation in intellectual, levels for our kids. And so our individuals with disabilities frequently are left behind their peers, and their peers all of a sudden make these huge jumps intellectually. And then most student ministry groups, they'll have their group, their main group time for worship, they'll have a main message, and then they break into groups. 6th grade boys, 11th grade girls, so on and so forth. It's when they're in those small groups, even if they have a buddy, that we start seeing problems when we're trying to keep them integrated. The problem is they're talking, they're discussing, going through everything, but the discussions are above the head of our friends. And let's say we've got an 8th grader and the discussion, they're not following it, 8th grade boy. Well, if you're an 8th grade boy and you're not understanding the discussion that's going on, you get bored. And when you get bored, you get distracted and you start causing problems. And when one 8th grade boy starts distractions and doing things, all the 8th grade boys do it. It's a domino effect. And so you can have the absolute best buddy in the world with them, but if it's over their head, they're not going to be able to keep up with it, and it's just not going to work. And so what I've done, and it's been incredibly successful, you keep everyone all together for the worship, for the game time. A lot of time they'll do games, and then I've started pulling out for the message, because I found even the message is above the level of our friends, and they might fall asleep, they might start causing problems. And then I create another group for student ministries, and it's our disability group, our special needs group, which is for all the ages and both sexes there. And then we meet together, we'll do the same lesson, we'll have all the same discussions, but now we do it at a level that they understand and they can comprehend. And that is real successful. So we're focusing on their abilities, not their disabilities, but still allowing them to be a part of the big group and be involved in everything. The other difference in student ministries that we do, that this then allows many, cities, the high schools for individuals with special needs have, extended schools. So, they'll go until they're 21 or 24 based on the school district. Well, they still are part of the high school, and they still feel they should be part of the student ministry, which they definitely should. So when you have this class like this, you can easily have, the 21 or 24-year-old in there still and have them feel like they're still a part of it. So that's kind of the over thing with those three. Now with that, any question on that, and then we can dive into it more. Leanne.
I had a question about this, because our experience is we have children move up into our student ministry. There's only one. And you can't really have a class with one. And when I offered that she could come back our room and I could provide curriculum for her after they did the large group, she didn't want to. She wanted to go in with her class. And we do want them to develop relationships with the other girls, in her case, that are her age. And so it's been a real dilemma of how to help her participate, because it's exactly what you're talking about. These other girls are having discussions that are beyond her ability to comprehend. And it's distracting for them that she may be causing some disturbance. And yet we can't just create a class necessarily for her in the student ministry. And so, that's the dilemma if you don't have enough kids to create a class.
Right. And yeah, so that's a great point, Leanne. And one other thing I want to share too, while I'm thinking about it, when you're in student ministries, things flip. I shared for elementary, my experience is just about every individual with autism needs a buddy and those with Down syndrome don't. When my kids get to student ministry, I find my individuals with Down syndrome, they do fine and they don't need the buddies. They'll actually do better there. They might even be able to integrate into the classrooms without causing the problems. It's my individuals with autism, unless they're high functioning, my individuals with autism that just really struggle and cannot do it. And they all require buddies. But back to the point, what do you do for the classroom then with that? There are a couple options that you have. You could create a classroom of one, but you need to have at least 2 leaders in there. So that takes, a lot of resources. And sometimes it's once you start it, more will see, oh, that's available, and they'll come. More parents will hear about it and come. And it may be that you're not having any other families come because they don't think something's there. And so I've seen that happen before too. I love what you suggested, well, let her be there then for the worship and everything, and then come back to one of your classes for the study time with that. And I think that's also a very good option. And then I'd say, and then maybe let her finish early so that she can then go back at the tail end maybe of the class, so she can still feel that she's there and a part of it and making some connections there with it. But it is kind of hard to work through that. Caitlin.
So my church had a very similar thing. We have one adult with special needs, and so he is integrated into like a normal classroom, but probably needs a little more help than necessarily, or a little more attention to curriculum than everyone else does. So my church is partners with the Missouri Baptist Children's Home, and so we were able to reach out to them, and they have so many group homes within the area. And so we're actually working with them to bring individuals with special needs into our church, to integrate them and to create like our own like little Sunday school class. So I'm wondering if maybe you could, because I worked for not a Christian company, but I worked in group homes for 4 years around the Kansas City area. And one of the things that they cannot deny rights, and I know you're in Tennessee, so maybe the laws are different, but is I forget how the law's worded, but it's they can't prohibit access to religious activities. Like they have to be able to offer a way to get to religious activities. They can't take that away. So I'm wondering if there's group homes in your area or something that you could contact and be like, hey, we're here if you want to come. And then maybe that's what worked for us.
And we have had an adult class that had older teens would go into that class with adults and we had group homes that we were transporting individuals from, and we have done that in the past, and it worked really well for the older teens and the young adults to be together because they were on the same level, really. I think with this, it's 6th grade is when student ministry starts. I think it's that 6th and 7th, maybe into 8th grade, that is really the challenge, that they're still kind of kids. They act like little kids, of course. and yet the student ministry is giving more freedom that they're not able to handle, or curriculum they're not able to handle. So that is a real transition time. That is something that we're trying to figure out what to do in that transition time.
Leanne, one of the other things I've done, I agree with everything you two have both said. They're great, and I've done some of the same. But one of the things I've done, because you're absolutely right, that jump from 5th grade to 6th grade is a huge, massive jump. A lot of change and transitions. And I've had a handful of my families that I thought it's going to be a challenge for them, to do that. And so I then sit down with the family and the individual and talk with them. And I've offered them, if you'd like, we will allow you to stay in children's in 5th grade for another year or so, to kind of help with this transition, to kind of help build that up. And that's been helpful for a couple of our families, where we've tried the kids in student ministry, and it's just a huge failure. They're having so much problem with it. But then when we bring them back, again, it goes back to the developmental level. When we bring them back to the 5th grade or whatever, they're able to do well again and learn. And the bottom line is what we're wanting to teach them about Jesus. We're wanting to help them grow their personal relationship with God. And so whatever way we can do that is the win for it. And sometimes we're going to have to think outside the box with how we do all that. Other thoughts or questions? So Caitlin, does that help answer the questions you were having? I guess the other question you had with that is, where does the ministry originate? Is that how it was, or?
Yeah, so we have right now we have again, I'm just starting in this ministry role. And so we have an unofficial buddy system with different people are paired up with, just like people within the congregation have just clicked with these kids and they've moved through whatever with them. But a lot of the feedback I've heard from those buddies is, hey, I haven't gone to Sunday school before, and I've been in this role for, X amount of years, or like, hey, I've not done this or that or whatever, and I'm feeling burnt out. I love this kid and I want to be their buddy, and I don't know how anyone else would be their buddy because I've been their buddy for so long. But how do I get a break, basically? So
Yeah.
I don't know if you all do, like, it's just one person with one buddy and they're always with them, because I really would love to bless those people because they have blessed me by having this ministry created somewhat, by running it without me for a little bit, by giving them a break from this ministry so they can find their own community within the church and congregation. So
Yeah, go ahead, Leanne.
So I was going to speak to that a little bit, because we've been doing our buddy system now for about 7 years, but sometimes we've only had 2 volunteers. Right now we have 10. So I think that is the key, is to get your volunteers and your volunteer pool big enough that you can say, and some people want to volunteer, they have preferences, an age or a service. Like if you got 2 services, they might want to be one service and not the other service, or Sunday school and not the worship. The way, I try to accommodate the preferences, but I think building your volunteer pool is what's going to help you be able to rotate and give them 2 Sundays a month or 1 Sunday a month or whatever they can manage. And yes, the kids do get familiar with one person, but they can get familiar with 2 or 3 or 4 a month, because they can. It just takes time for the person to get familiar with them. But what we do to help the rotating volunteers, we have a little half sheet. And on that half sheet, the shepherd will write what the individual, what the kid did well, what they liked, what they participated in. It's nothing negative, but they like music or they liked coloring. And that way that gives the next week, the person has that child a clue of what to go to for them. They like the coloring sheet, or they like the movement at music. And so like I say, it's nothing negative. It's always positive how to help the child participate. And that seems helpful, especially when we use youth. Our youth can only serve in 1 hour, but we do that as opportunity of service for our youth, and they're great with kids. And that's a great way to rotate your volunteers, because they'll usually want just one Sunday during that hour that they're allowed to volunteer, because they're supposed to go to their own student ministry. And that they have that half sheet, they can look and see what the child is good at, what they need. Do they need a fidget toy or a stuffed animal, or for comfort or whatever? Their full profile that their parent has provided is always available to volunteer, because that has the phone number of the responsible parent. We haven't had a situation well, we have had situations where the shepherd needed the parent immediately, and so they need that information sheet. So all of that is on a clipboard and in a folder for the volunteer, and that way they're rotating, but they have the information they need from Sunday to Sunday.
Yeah, so that's all great. I don't know, anyone else have any other ideas or comments?
Just a brief comment.
Yeah.
This happens a lot, I think, with other kind of volunteers who get deeply connected to a ministry. But sometimes I think from a leadership standpoint, having more than 1 or 2 volunteers that deeply connected actually helps the congregation as a whole become more open and accepting, as you have multiple volunteers move through and work with your friends, the children or youth, so that you have a broader set of advocacy in the church over time out of those experiences. So it's just a general observation. I know you. I just speak also with just deep appreciation for people who are willing to be buddies and really go along that journey. So it's not anything demeaning, but normally it just kind of helps to expand the ministry, because you're building a capacity there over time that can be really helpful as other unique children appear and unique adults appear.
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else? So couple things on this. One, we obviously love having volunteers, and we love having the consistency of our weekly volunteer and having that same person with the individual. But it really is not required. Our individuals with disabilities can do just as well if they have someone different every single week. They're still going to do okay. They may not be able to form the tight connection that they have with just one person, but they're still going to do fine. They're going to learn about Jesus' love, and that they're a child of God. That's still going to happen. And remember, that's our bottom line that we're trying to teach them. Any relationships and things that's all bonus. That's extras that can come along. But we have to take care of our volunteers. When we hear them say, I'm getting burned out, or those are all warning flags, and we got to take that seriously. And We can't sit here and say, oh, well, can you just give me another month? We need to sit there and say, thank you so much for letting me know. We are so appreciative of what you have done. And you do such a great job being a buddy with Susie or Johnny, but we want you to take care of yourself too. And we definitely don't want you to burn out. So what do you think would be a good compromise for you? Would you like to serve maybe 2 weeks a month, like doing every other week? Do you want to back up to once a month and then kind of let them make that decision, but let them know it's okay. We can never place any guilt on them for making those decisions. We need to celebrate that with them and then let them know, if they say, well, I've always been the buddy with them, we can say, well, you know what? We're going to be able to find someone else who can receive just as much of a blessing from them as you did. You didn't know how to best take care of them when you first got with them, and you learned by being a friend. That's really all this is all about, is being a friend. And so we've got other volunteers who are willing to be a friend, and they're going to be able to step in so you don't have to bear all the work. And so let us help you get your tank filled, get your fellowship that is needed, and we'll make sure that Johnny or Susie is still being taken care of. And so back to that, if you've got volunteers who want to serve every week, fantastic. I'll never turn them away, because you've got some who are completely sold out, and that's what floats their boat. They're passionate about that, and God's laid it on their heart. That's their job to do. I'm not going to talk them out of it. I've talked with some churches that say you absolutely cannot serve every week. You can only serve 2 Sundays a month. I think it depends on the person, and leave that up to them. But for our individuals, we do like consistency, and we'll try to do as much as we can. But if we can't, that's okay. Maybe you've got 2 volunteers that can switch with them. And what I've done that works real nice, when you've got 2 volunteers, guess what? You just built in something in case someone gets sick or someone goes on vacation. And so I let them know each other, and they get to know each other. And I've had it where I didn't even know they've contacted each other and said, oh, well, Frank was sick today, so I'm filling in for him today, and he's going to take my spot next week. Great. It still works for me. That box is getting filled, but I didn't have to use my energy and time to do it. So when you got 2 on the same individual, you can play some of those games. It's also okay if you got a new volunteer every single week with them. It's definitely not the best. And it will be a little bit harder for the individual. You might have a few more behaviors, but you're providing means for that child to be there. And so, yes, that works as well. But the bottom line, I think it was Leanne who said it, we need to recruit more volunteers to be in. We should always have extra volunteers. And one of the things I love to do, even, if we first off, never feel like you're going to get to the point that you've got all the volunteers you need. Okay. Because you won't. That doesn't exist. I've been in ministry 15 years. I never had enough volunteers. Okay. There's always something that comes up and always more need. So just remove that thought from your head. Second, what could be great is if you do recruit enough volunteers, more volunteers than you have individuals, you can create a buddy float. Someone who comes in, who can step in if someone's sick or someone doesn't show up, or that can just help out if maybe you've got a child, like Jane was saying, who they don't need a buddy on a regular basis. But maybe that weekend they're having a tough day, because any child can have a bad day and they need help that day. Well, guess what? Now you've got a buddy float who can step in and help out there. Or if you got a sensory room, they could help out in the sensory room, so that way you always have 2 people in there, so that when you bring in a participant and their buddy, you've already got that third person because a buddy floats in there, and you don't have to worry about finding extra people to get your numbers. So those are some things that you can do there, finding that. So any other thoughts or comments dealing with that?
Forgive me, folks, I'd have to jump, but I've got a lot to learn, so I appreciate the hour I got to share with you guys.
Absolutely. Thanks for being with us, Bob. You have a blessed night.
Thank you. Take care.
On the topic of having a good volunteer base, would you suggest before, I'm interested in doing more outreach, building that volunteer base before we start doing the active outreach or whatever that
Yes.
looks like?
Yes.
That would
Yeah,
make sense.
absolutely. So let's get into that next one, Jane's area. So two-part question, and make sure I've got them both. The first one was, how do we reach our surrounding community to bring them in? Because, first off, if you don't know the numbers, let me share some numbers with you. It's estimated that 90% of families with disabilities do not attend church today. It's the largest unmet people group in the United States. They're in our backyard. And there's 3 reasons why families with disabilities are not attending church. First reason, they're afraid the church is not prepared to take care of their child. Well, currently, studies show that only 11% of churches today welcome individuals with disabilities. That means 89% of churches today are sending families away. It's not acceptable. It's not biblical. So they're right. The majority of churches today don't know how to take care of an individual with special needs. Secondly, they know what a burden their child can be, and so they don't want to be a burden to the church. So they just don't come. Or third, and this is the one that breaks my heart, they've been asked to leave the church too many times before, and they can't bear to be asked to leave again because they believe that God is giving up on them. Well, God's not giving up on them. It's the church that is giving up on them, but God still loves them. God, their son, their daughter still created in the image and likeness of God and is a child of God. And so that's the reasons why they're not coming. Now, we need to get more volunteers. And so let's address that, because Jane is right. We have to have the volunteers before we ever try to reach out to the community. And, there is the old adage, if you build it, they will come. And that's one of the things that we're all, fearful about. We're designing this disability ministry. We're going to build this. And all of a sudden, all the community is going to come in and we're not going to be ready to handle it. I thought that as well. It's just not true. You might be sitting there going, hold on, Doc, you said you went from 3 families to 800. You built it, they came. Yes, but it wasn't like that at the beginning. So let me tell you another thing. And one of the best pieces of advice you can ever do as you're going through a disability ministry, I need you to think as a parent of a child with special needs. You need to have a leadership team that helps make decisions, and you need a parent on that team to help speak into things, because you might come up with ministry ideas to do that are great, but they're just not going to work for a family with a child with special needs. And you wouldn't know that unless you walk in the shoes of a parent. Here's the other thing. And I should have known this, because I thought, hey, I'm building this. We're putting out our shingle, disability ministry. All the families will start coming. And they didn't. Well, then I started thinking about it. What would I do as a parent? Am I about to take my child with special needs, and my child is complicated? Am I about to take them to a church because they say they can do a disability ministry and that they know how to do it? No. Who am I going to trust? I'm not. I need to see it myself to make sure they know what they're doing. However, if a family in your church with a child with special needs comes up to me and says, hey, Doc, you really need to bring your family, you need to get Mark into our ministry because they're doing a great job with my child with special needs. And I think they do a great job with yours too. I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll give that a try. So it's word of mouth from parents is what grows that. And it's slow at the beginning and it speeds up over time. And there are ways that you can jumpstart that too. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But let's come back to our volunteers. We have to have volunteers to be ready to get everybody. And so I'm going to make a general assumption here. And some of you have heard this already, so I apologize. Just bear with me. But I'm going to make the assumption that all of your churches are like just about every church I've ever attended or worked with, where 80% of the work in the church is done by 20% of the people. Is that fair to say? You know, so that the overwhelming majority of the people in your church are not connected and involved. Really what that tells me is you've got 80% of your church who are nothing more than glorified knickknacks sitting in the chairs every Sunday or the pews collecting dust during the sermon. And then they get up and leave. They're not connected. They're not giving back. They're just receiving and going. And guilty myself as a former children's pastor, as a disability pastor, I kept going to that same 20% to get my volunteers. We always go after the same group. We can't do that. We need to go after that 80%. And so how are we going to bring, what we have to do is bring awareness to the church that this ministry exists and help people know. Well, we can't just ask people to serve. We need to share this by sharing stories. And stories are powerful. You know, what I'd encourage is get a video. Ask some of your families who are attending your church, would you mind us just shooting a video and you sharing what it means just to be able to come to church? And maybe even share some of the struggles you have in getting to church. You might go, what do you mean? Well, you know, I had a mom I talked to and she goes, Doc, you know what? Sunday morning, I get Johnny ready. And then I go up myself and I get ready for church. And I come downstairs, Johnny's naked. I have to get him all dressed again. And then I go get my other two kids ready for church. And they're all good. And I come back, Johnny's naked again. And so I get him dressed again. Then I go make breakfast for everybody. And then I come back, Johnny's naked again. I actually have to dress my 9-year-old 4 times at least before we can get out of the door. You share a message like that to the church and they're going to be going, what do you mean? You mean a 9-year-old can't dress themselves? Holy cow. You mean it takes 2 hours to get out of the door? And some of these things just open the eyes of people. But then we also share our story. And here's how I love starting, even before I play that. One of the things you always hear me say, I've only got one requirement for someone to serve in my ministry. It's a simple question. Can you be a friend? That's all it takes. Yes, you have to pass a background check and whatever other requirements you have for your church. But really it comes down to, can you be a friend? You don't have to have any experience. We can teach you that. So what I've done, I've gotten in front of the church. And my first question to everyone, I go, welcome everyone this morning. So glad to see all of you. I got a simple question for you. If you can be a friend, please raise your hand. The entire church raises their hand because everyone says they can be a friend. And then I'm like, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Each and every one of you just met the only requirement we have to serve in our brand new ministry, serving individuals with disabilities. Did you know only 11% of churches in the United States today welcome families with disabilities? 89% send families away. And I'll use Caitlin's church, but Fellowship Church, we are going to be that 11%, and we're going to welcome families with disabilities. And we need help doing that. All you have to do is be a friend, and we can teach you everything else. Now, please just take a minute and hear a story about what it means to come to church from one of our families. And then let them share, what it means just to be able to come to church. Maybe they even share how, they weren't able to come to church before because there was no one to take care of their child with it, or they had to take care of the child and then they never got filled. and then come back and say, we'd love to have you transform the lives of these amazing individuals. And this church, this is going to be part of our DNA, where we are going to welcome families and individuals with disabilities. Would you please help us in transforming that? I'd love to talk with you later. You're going to get people who are get up. You're going to get some of that 80%, because all of a sudden we've offered something new, and that might be what it took to get the Holy Spirit to light them on fire and say, that's it for us. Now, the other thing, each and every one of you as a ministry leader or as a volunteer, yes, your job on Sunday is to be making sure, taking care of the individual or taking care of the ministry, putting out fires. But you got one other big job that we overlook all the time. I overlooked it in my early days as a children's pastor. Our job is to be observing everyone that's coming into our ministry area and observing people to see who would become a good volunteer. And so here's my pure gold when it comes to volunteer recruitment. The 4 most important letters for volunteer recruitment are I, C, N, U. I, C, N, U. And this is how it works. Jane, I'm going to use you, okay? I would come up to you on a Sunday morning. I would literally put my hand on your shoulder and say, hey, good morning, Jane. Do you have just a minute? I'd like to talk with you. It's like, usually, sure. And then I'd say, you know what, Jane? I just need to let you know, I've been observing you the last few weeks, and I've got to tell you, I see in you someone who has an amazing heart for people. I see in you someone who's patient, and I really believe that you could do an amazing job in a new ministry we're starting. And I've got a simple question for you. Can you be a friend? I've always had the answer, yes. I'm like, fantastic, because that's the only requirement we have to serve in this ministry. We can teach you everything else. You don't need to know anything. And our ministry is a special needs or disability ministry. And we just need people to be friends with them and be a guide on the side. And I've got a huge favor now to ask you. Would you please take the next 2 weeks and pray and see if God would have you serve in this ministry? And then maybe in 2 weeks, we can sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and see what that would look like. I've also have never had anyone turn me down when I ask them to pray, especially as a pastor or as a ministry leader. In church, they're not going to sit there and say, no, I'm not going to pray. I come back in 2 weeks, I meet with them. Guess what my success rate is? 90 to 95% at getting them to serve. Why? 1, I made it personal. I tapped them on the shoulder and I made it personal. I didn't do it all from the pulpit. 2, I told them what I saw in them, qualities that would make them effective. I asked if they could be a buddy, be a friend. They said yes. I said, that's the only requirement. You've already met that requirement. Did I ask them to serve? No. I asked them to pray. And I let God do all my heavy lifting. I don't have to do it. God's the one who convicts them and convinces them then that they need to serve. And then they come in and then they're going to serve. It makes my job super easy. The only ones that have told me no are those who say, I'm already tied up in other ministries, but God has told me that I love what you're doing. If you do anything outside of the weekend, outside of Sunday, I'd love to help and volunteer with that. Fantastic. I've been able to plug them into other things through the week, but that's one way that we can build up those volunteers. Then for growing the ministry, it will take time. It's going to mainly be by word of mouth, but we can also kind of help speed some of that up as we get the volunteers ready to get people. We can do other little things by offering, for instance, a respite night, a parent nights out. And especially those in the greater Kansas City area, that's where SOAR can really partner with you, because we do mobile respites where we could come to your church, partner with you, we bring in all the equipment, and then we can help minister to a family for 2 or 3 hours on a Friday or Saturday and meet their need. The family will see, oh, this church really does know what they're doing. And then we invite them to come back on the weekend if they don't have a home church. We also invite volunteers to come if they don't have a home church. And that's one way that you'll see them, because they'll go, oh, well, you really did a good job taking care of my child for 3 hours. Yeah, we can try an hour. It's also a great way to get new volunteers, because if you got a volunteer who can survive 2 to 3 hours of a respite parents' night out, doing 1 hour on a Sunday morning is no problem. And so that's another way that you can do that. So a respite is a nice way to build the community awareness as you get going. And that is something that you can definitely share with the school districts. Even though it's being held at a church, the school districts will share that, because how important it is for respite, and their families desperately need it. I was able to share all of my respites with every school district, and every email I sent out, they sent it to every one of their families. And I now, even though we're a faith-based nonprofit, I share this with school districts, and they let their families know as we go. Because it's respite, and they know how vital it is and how important it is for their families. And so they're willing to do that. And it doesn't bother them that it's faith-based, because we're not telling them to come here for church. We're telling them to come here for a respite event for the parents to go out and get rest with it. So that's what the difference is. So I've just been talking for a good while. Any questions or any thoughts anyone has? Thanks so much, Dean.
Blessings, everyone. We'll see you again. So.
All right. We'll see you, brother. Yeah, go ahead, Leanne. You're muted.
So I appreciate everything that you mentioned, because it really spoke into what our journey has been with volunteers. And you had a lot of good ideas that we didn't use, because we didn't have a platform to the entire church. It was not given to us, and that's not always given to an individual. Pastors are very sometimes protective of their time in the pulpit. So what we did, we had information meetings, and we didn't, I still think it's a good idea. We didn't have a lot of attendance, but the 1 or 2 or 3 at a time people that would come, we did get them involved. And it did work, just have an information meeting, and we were able to publicize that in the church, calendar and everything. The other thing that I've done for volunteers is in individual classrooms, adult classrooms, and either I would promote it kind of informally in my class, or other people involved in the ministry or those who knew about it would publicize it in some way in their Sunday school classrooms. And that's how we've basically gotten the volunteers that we've gotten. And it is as well for families, to draw families word of mouth, to get volunteers. It's word of mouth. But I like what you talked about stories, because that's been very helpful. We didn't have any families in our church when I started our ministry, but my son and his wife had adopted a special needs child, and that's my grandson.
Yeah.
And their experience with church and trying to find a church, they made a video of what it meant to them to find a church, to not have a church, not have people who could take care of their child, and then to find a church. And then the testimony of that, sharing that with another family that they knew of, them coming to church. And the father was unsaved, and made profession of because he was able to come to church with his child that formerly no one would take care of. So that video with that testimony has been very powerful in recruiting volunteers. So I agree with the idea of having the stories and having the family testimony. That is very, very good. And it really brings home the need. Most people don't even realize there's a need. It's an invisible population.
Absolutely.
Invisible need, and it's an unreached group right among us, really.
Yeah. So, some of, I love some of the new statistics that are out that I share with people all the time. Anyone have an idea what the largest minority group is in the United States today? It's individuals with special needs and disabilities. It makes up 26% of the US population. 26% of the US population today is disabled or has special needs. That's huge and nobody talks about it.
Right.
One other thing that all of you can do right now for finding volunteers, I forgot to mention this, use the individuals with special needs that you already have. And let me explain that. They have this innate ability. They've got this amazing heart that can see right through people. And I absolutely love it. They don't care what you look like. They don't care how you act. They look at your heart and they know if you like them or not, just from looking at you. They've got this uncanny ability to do that. And so on Sunday, see who they go up to and start talking to. See who they go up and grab a hand of. That's the first person for you to go and start observing and trying to recruit, because they're telling you, hey, this person works. And then a lot of times, watch how they respond. Usually they're going to respond pretty cool with them. And then you just have a conversation, say, hey, I saw how you responded to Jack earlier today. Jack really loved partnering with you and you did great with him. You may not know this, but we actually have a special needs ministry, and all you have to do is be willing to be a friend. You've already shown me you know how to be a friend. You could do that. Would you prayerfully consider about joining our team and see if you do that? And I've gotten a lot of volunteers that way too. So watch these kids. They'll pick up a lot of volunteers for you. One other big one, and this is a big time out of the box thinking for you. And I've done this with my church and it's been highly successful. I had a lot of volunteers from outside the church who wanted to help volunteer, because especially youth or college students who needed community service hours. Well, I don't know about your church, but my church had a rule. You could only serve if you were a member of the church and if you had a strong profession of faith. Well, being one of the pastors, I went to our pastoral team and I challenged that. I said, as a buddy, you don't need a strong professional faith because you're not teaching that. You're helping them learn and helping them stay focused. There might be a small few areas where they would actually be the teacher. We obviously wouldn't have them in that position, but our general buddy is just that guy on the side helping them. Said, I've got all these people who want to come. And guess what? They would never step foot in this church otherwise. They just need community service hours. I got National Honor Society students. I've got sports teams. I've got physical therapy students in college. I got occupational therapy students, and I've got special ed students and elementary teacher students who all need experience. We can use it as a great outreach. Allow these individuals to come in, serve. I'll give them community service, and I promise you we'll be able to use it as outreach for them. They said, well, let's try it. I'm never going to forget my first volunteer I had. She served we had 5 services every weekend. She served all 5 services. And after 1 month, she grabbed me and said, hey, Doc, what's this whole Jesus thing all about? And I got to lead her to Christ over the next half hour. And then 2 months later, her mom and dad and 18-year-old brother come in because they said, I don't know what's been going on with her and what's different, but she's completely different and a new person. We want whatever she got. Give it to us. And I got to talk to them and I shared the gospel and I led mom and dad and 18-year-old brother to Christ. That was the first of many. I've led over 150 volunteers to Christ who we turned that into a major outreach as they came in. They only came in for community service hours. And without realizing it, they got to hear the salvation message through the children's ministry or through the student ministry. So that's another way that you might want to try to talk to the church to think about it. And again, senior leadership, I'm always happy to try to talk with them. If they ever want to talk, that's one of my specialties as well, is talking with senior leadership. So, all right. Other thoughts or other questions you guys have? I'm doing a lot of talking tonight, so I apologize.
No, I just want to thank you for all that you said. It's really good.
Good.
I have a little testimony real quick. I was actually praying about what to do about whether to stay at my church. I really wanted to get involved, that it seemed like we were kind of stuck. And I got a pretty clear answer the other morning in prayer. Part of my answer was that phrase you used, if you build it, they will come. And I had no idea really what that meant. And then you just said that and I was like, oh, cool. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely. I love when God can use me to help answer other people's stuff. So.
We may be running long, but I did want to try to touch base on how to get my leadership team energized and active. I've given them specific small tasks that they did not follow through on. And that was discouraging. I think their heart is there. I'm not sure. I mean, they agreed to be on the leadership team, and I'm kind of at a loss. We've met in person. I've sent emails and text, asking them to do specific things like come by our room and write a message of thanks to our volunteers. And no one shows up. And I was like, So anyway, that's my focus right now.
Yep. Thank you for bringing that back up, Leanne. I had it written down here, but I overlooked it, so I apologize. So I'm sorry. I'm assuming, we're talking about some of the senior leadership or other pastors on the leadership team, or is it just other individuals? What is this?
So these are professionals, a PT, an OT, a medical person. These are professionals that we need to guide our ministry. I'm not professional. Our volunteers are not professionals. I need a woman, she agreed, was going to help with training and develop, training material for new volunteers. And I want a parent. We don't have a parent that's available to be on there, but that's someone we need as a parent. And I also need, I think, a current volunteer. But right now we have an OT, a PT, and a medical, a nurse.
Okay. All right. So I'd say, and you may not like all this here, but you may just need to implode the team and start all over.
Well, we're going to.
It's hard. Yeah. Okay. So here, but we'll talk through multiple different things here with that. So I don't want you to be discouraged with any of that. So let me talk through all that, but I'll explain as I'm going with this. What I have found is when you get professionals who work with individuals with disabilities or might have some idea with it, whether they're a special ed teacher or occupational therapist or physical therapist, it's been very rare that they're willing to do anything for the weekend because they deal with it all week long and they need a break and they don't want to deal anymore on the weekend. And
Right.
I get that, and I totally understand that, and that's very fair. And so I don't then ask them to be the a buddy or anything like that. I have asked them to try to be on leadership teams with that, and sometimes that's worked and sometimes it's not. The other thing to realize is sometimes, and for myself in particular, I had a special ed teacher who was involved with training for the district. She helped me write training for my team. We trained all of our volunteers, and the very next week, I had to walk by a room and the volunteer was in there. The buddy was having a big behavior, and that volunteer was standing there deer in their headlights, not knowing what to do. And so I jumped in, took care of everything, got it settled. And then I talked to her afterwards, took her to the side, and I go, we just went over it last week. And she goes, I couldn't remember a thing we talked about. I'm like, okay, that training was worthless. It didn't work. I was proud of it. I'm like, it doesn't work if it doesn't apply. And what I have found is all that training is geared more towards the school and what works in schools. What works in school does not work at church. And church is a completely different animal. And we have to treat the individuals differently. We're not trying to follow any IEP or do anything there with that. So that's where I rewrote everything. I created a whole new curriculum and training that I do with churches all over. That's actually a case-based scenario where once a volunteer sees it, they've done it, they actually understand it and know what to do. I went to my medical background and my parent background, and that's how we teach in medicine. We teach by cases. So that's what I've done. But to try to get, the team interested and on board, sharing the mission and vision with them. You got to keep that out in front of them, and help them be cheerleaders and let them know what is going to be required of them being on this leadership team. Not just speaking in here or there, but they need to help be the cheerleaders for you to be to the rest of the church. They need to help be trying to recruit other people and share some of this. They need to help share that vision and everything. And it could be that, maybe even, and I have no idea, but maybe your medical person, the nurse, or maybe your physical therapist, maybe they really don't have much experience with individuals with special needs. So one of the things I've had fun doing is a very creative way to help them learn it, because they're not listening to the stories and really can almost have this, I'm so busy, I'm just doing this to help. I end up finding out that people will learn more and see it more when you break bread together. And so I end up doing a dinner where I invite a family with special needs, and then I'd have the leadership there too. And we have a meal together, and the family with special needs, they have their child there. And I tell them, please do not be praying that your child's on good behavior. Please don't try to prevent them from having behavior. I go, let them have a normal night, maybe even pray that they have a bad night. And, break bread and have a meal together and let these leaders see what life is really like for a family with special needs. They're going to be amazed that, oh my gosh, a 9-year-old can't even cut their own food. They have to feed them, and all these other things. They're going to be absolutely shocked and realize how difficult it is. And that's just a meal. Can you imagine everything else that's going on at home? And so that all of a sudden makes it real to them. And that's another story, but it's real because they're seeing it right there in front of them. But trying to find ways to get these leaders excited, we've got to be sharing stories with them, and just I'd be asking them even point blank, do you want to be here? And, if they really don't, let them go. Because if there's any negativity, if they're, resistant to anything you're trying to ask of them, it just becomes more of a headache for you and more work for you because you're getting so frustrated with what they're doing. So that's why I said it may be that you have to implode it and start all over again, which isn't fun. But, you put together a job description of what's required to be a leader. You let them know what that is, and you may already have one with that, but have that there so that they know the expectations, and then you hold them to it. And if you already have a job description, I'd go back to them and say, hey, look, we want to take this ministry to the next level. I can't do it on my own. I need you to help me. You've signed up to be on this leadership team. I need you to do what the description said that you signed up for, X, Y, and Z. And you're not following up on this. What can I do to get you to be a part of this? And just being very truthful and very honest with them, and then letting them share their story of why. But letting them know that we need them to be passionate. We need them to be part of the team with it. And there may be other people who are better suited to be there as leaders for it. And it may be something that they thought they might be interested in, but the more they do it, they're just like, I'm so burned out from the week. I just don't want to even think about it on the week. I get that. And so that's something that, and we can even start. I've had that conversation with the leader, said, hey, I'm sure you get so worn out by the time the week's done of working with these individuals and the families that you don't want to think about it anymore. And, if that's the case and you just want a complete break from everything, I release you from this position to allow you just to have that break that you need to take care of yourself. Is that helpful? And I had a leader say, oh yes, that would be amazing. And so, she wasn't doing anything for me, but that, she was there feeling like she had to.
Yeah, I at this point, they're not burned out doing anything for us because they hadn't done anything.
Right, I get that.
I think though the idea that I'm going to, now that I have my other responsibilities delegated, I'm just going to talk about it like, all right, this is a new day. We're ready to take our ministry to the next level. We need energy and excitement. And we can, I've shared our mission and vision. I've shared our stories, and that was at the beginning. When they were saying yes, yes, and yes. And now we're gonna get back to that. And what we're saying yes to, we got to really do it. And here's what we need to do. And then I think the other piece that you mentioned was that accountability. Mm-hmm. It's hard when you're dealing with volunteers. I always feel like they need their own motivation if they're a volunteer. But I guess following up to hold people accountable to what they've agreed to, that is probably the piece that's missing.
Yeah.
I'm weak on that area, and I like that. I need to do that and help them, because if they want to, okay, here, let me give you a little push.
It goes back to limit setting. Okay. Setting limits. And so I've got a younger brother, and we grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. My grandma lived in Phoenix. My dad was an only child. His father passed away at a young age. And so we knew every Sunday after church, we were going to my grandma's house for lunch. That was routine every week. Well, my brother and I, being good brothers, as soon as we got in the backseat of the car, we started fighting, punching each other, as good, loving brothers do. And my dad, every time, would say, if you two don't stop, I'm going to stop and turn around and go home, and we're not going to grandma's. Did we ever stop? No, because we knew if we went home, we weren't the ones in trouble. Dad was, because grandma would be upset we didn't go to her house. However, and so that limit had zero consequence for us. It meant nothing. However, if dad said, now if you boys don't knock it off, you're not going to get any dessert at grandma's house today.
Oh, yeah.
We would have stopped, because grandma would have held that up too and said, no, you boys aren't getting it. And they would have eaten it all in front of us as we had to sit at the table and watch them eat. I promise you we would have stopped, because that was an enforceable one. And so, if you've got all these tasks that you're asking, responsibilities, and you're not showing, hey, this has to be enforceable, we need to make sure it's being done, they're just going to continue to push that line. And, it is so much easier, even as a volunteer, to let you do all the work. Yeah, I'll check the box that I'm on this team, but you've got it. You're going to do the work. Why do I need to?
Right.
And it's sharing, no, this is a team and I can't do all this. I need you. I rely on you, and I'm relying on this team, and that's going to help make a difference there with it. The other thing I'd share, and I'd share with everybody on here now, and anybody listening at a future point, SOAR and myself, we offer free consultations as well. So, get with us. I'd love to do a free consultation, hour-long consultation, talk about anything you need with your ministry. Leanne, we could talk through training and everything. I don't know if we've got anything set up, but that's something we can do, and talk through any other area with things and see how we can help you.
So how do you feel about having a Zoom meeting with our leadership team?
I'm fine with that.
So let's talk about maybe that, and that might help energize them a little bit to hear that outside voice of the importance of this. And
yeah, I've met with other teams before with the council, so that's
okay.
That's not a problem at all.
We'll
So,
talk about
see about getting that team set up.
Okay.
All right.
Appreciate meeting the other folks on here and knowing about the other ministries too. And so thank you, Jane and Caitlin, and the other folks that are on here.
Yep. One thing, and I know we're coming close to our time. One thing I just want to let you all know and be watching. I'll be sending something out probably next week. I'm gonna be a speaker at the All Access Disability Ministry Conference. It's based out of Houston, but this year it's 100% virtual. And so I'm actually doing a whole talk on volunteers. But I'm going to have a discount code to sign up that you'll be able to sign up. I think the code is going to be SOAR. So I'll be sending that out, and you can sign up for that. But there's going to be some wonderful speakers. Two of my dear friends are putting that on. Sandra Peoples, who is a parent and a sibling of an individual with special needs, and a pastor's wife. And then Tiffany Crow, who is a behavioral therapist and phenomenal herself. I've worked with both of them a lot. They're putting out this together, and this year it's all going to be virtual. So that'd be a great way that you can get some of these great, fantastic talks and then watch them at your leisure over the next couple of months. So please be watching that. I'll be sending that out. And I hope you take advantage of it. It should be a pretty affordable conference for you to attend, and be able to do it at your own home and not have to travel also really helps that pocketbook. But with that, any other questions or any parting words that anyone's got? All right, well, let me just close us in prayer, and then I'll give you an extra 15 minutes to your night. Our gracious Heavenly Father, God, I thank you so much for all that you do. God, I thank you for all the churches and ministries that have been represented here tonight. Pray for those who weren't able to make it. And God, just pray that you help us in reaching our families. Pray that you'll help us in recruiting new volunteers, building our leadership teams. God, just help us be effective in becoming a beacon of light in our communities for families with disabilities. God, my heart is just filled with joy knowing that we've got these churches that are welcoming individuals with disabilities, and just praying out that you will help them to continue to do that and grow this, and just give them wisdom and discernment. Let them know that they are not alone, that we've got this network with one another to be able to come alongside and help. And God, we just thank you for all that you do now, and we'll pray this all in your great and holy name. Amen. All right, guys, you all have a blessed day. We'll meet again next month, the 4th Tuesday, which I don't have my calendar open, or the 4th Thursday, I should say. And that's going to be February. Oh my gosh.
23rd, I think.
Thank you. February 23rd. And it'll be from 12:30 to 2:30 Central Standard Time. So even months we do it during the day. That way we'll flip flop. So if someone is, we try to get those who are working during the days and those who are on staff, and so we'll get everybody. So if you're able to join us, then we'd love to have you. But otherwise, you all have a blessed evening, and blessings to you all. God
Thank
bless.
you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.